This is not a review. Saying the game is good or bad is not my goal. I'm more interested in asking what were they thinking? What happened in the past 25 years of Bethesda? Morrowind showed me an incredible world. A fantasy book come to life. Far from perfect, but technology seemed the limiting factor there. And 21 years later we could say the same thing. But the solution seems much farther away than Morrowind. Will there ever be a game engine capable of representing the whole universe? Even one planet seemed too much for a studio that always struggled to represent cities. Their ambition to push the boundaries of what was technically possible meant that they couldn't have too many NPCs in the same spot. And they used the same trick in Starfield and they used in Morrowind for Vivek City. It's split in different cantons, separated by loading screens. But Morrowind looked much more impressive at the time compared to how Starfield looks now. Regardless, I didn't have a problem with low NPC counts because I always assumed that everyone represented 10 or 100 people, just like in strategy games when you are moving your army and it's represented by just one soldier. Makes sense. The problem is the scale. Comparing a remote province to the whole universe, some things really stand out. And not just the fact that there are a handful of cities in more than 1,000 planets, because maybe many planets are inhospitable, so no one might want to inhabit 99% of them. The problem is that when there's a huge empty planet, there's only one city and just randomly generated settlements everywhere. So why would people want to live in the middle of the wilderness, too far away from any help if their spaceship breaks down, if there's plenty of room to set up a village?
Move back to New Atlantis. I'm going to open a real shop there. One that actually, you know, gets customers.
There are not many resources anyway, so it's doubtful that the people will actually survive in this world, but there's no reason to go so deep when there are very obvious surface problems. For example, in Morrowind, every NPC has a house, and you can see what they are like, which social class they belong to, just by looking at their things, while in Starfield everyone has the same trinkets, same clutter everywhere, same tablet, not much for entertainment, which makes sense in an older society when everyone is focused on survival, but when you have a futuristic city, what are they doing during the day? And more important than that, why do top executives have the same sculptures as on a remote mining outpost? If the essential is there, we can guess the rest, but if the clutter is here and there's no core distinguishing item, then everything will look the same. Of course, if the corporation have taken over, then it makes sense that everywhere looks the same, just like they're the same shops and fast food chains around the world. But that doesn't mean that you'll find CEOs eating burgers in there. While CEOs here are just handing out tasks to the new employee, might as well be the secretary. And they didn't even have to add more budget for the fancy restaurants, just reorganize what they had, the building blocks. For example, Terra Brew could have been the popular choice, while the elite drank only Tranquil Tea. Instead, the Eugene Corporation who owns Tranquil Tea will send you to bring them coffee from the other place. And the same thing with the geodes that are not really expensive at all.
I would never dream of selling substandard gear. Outland has standards.
And even less so when you consider all the planets they're mining. They could have made a fancy, popular sculpture, geode sculpture, that only a few could afford, and thousands of replicas that look similar, so you don't have to make a new model, but they're worth a small fraction of the price. Because that was the main focus, and you can clearly see from the value of the clutter, many small items are worth nothing. You can even pick them up from anywhere, it's not considered stealing, while the sculptures are worth a bit more because they catch your attention, but not too much that money becomes meaningless compared to weapons and spaceships. Those were clearly the focus, but world building needed a bit more attention because they couldn't rely on past games like in the Elder Scrolls and Fallout to set up the world. So what did Bethesda do? A museum. That would be an interesting idea if it wasn't just like old slides when games didn't have the option of making cutscenes. So they went old school for the only thing that didn't benefit from being old school. It seems that no one checked the consistency of the whole system. Yes, video games can resemble a theme park frozen in time for our enjoyment. But where are the attractions? Where are the mascot characters?
Why walk when you can ride?
Where is Crassius Curio? I tried to recreate the magic, but that's not the game asking you to remove your clothes. No surprises here, aside from the fact that the managers are explaining the kid who brought coffee how things work in the business for some reason.
Oh boy, you're gonna be a real handful.
There is the skeleton of a theme park, but it's still under construction. Even the small things, compare the dancer in the Astral Lounge with Suran's House of Earthly Delight. Which one of them is bringing new customers in? Competent acrobats in a bustling market town? Or 3 doofuses on a block for people who enter this exclusive club?
It's party time! Get zoned and have fun!
They would have been much better as waiters, would have made more sense, but then Bethesda would have to implement some movement from these poor guys. In Morrowind, people are static because they didn't have the technology yet, and they showed it in Oblivion, though not everyone appreciated the effort when they couldn't find the person they needed. But Morrowind's towns make sense. Between temples, mines, entertainment, the ruling class, the conquerors, awkwardly maintaining peace, out of sight, just in case. Even if they're stuck in time, there's conflict. You can imagine how things could escalate, even though it's way beyond the scope of the video game. Instead, I have no idea what people want in New Atlantis. Of course, the United Colonies government is worried about pirates, but the war is over, seems nothing dramatic is going on. The secret society of Constellation seems like a group of kids dreaming about the universe. Everyone else just stares blankly ahead. Makes me nostalgic for Oblivion. Same look in their eye. I guess when you live in a city that you need to travel by train from one plaza to the next, you have more pressing problems. This could have also easily been justified by encasing the zones in glass and saying that to breathe we need to stay in smaller compartments, like Omicron the Nomad Soul did. Forgotten masterpiece. And if you build those far apart, it justifies the train between loadable areas and avoids the dumb tower in the middle of nowhere. So there could be big boring zones where only residents can enter, train stops between the Plaza District, and maybe the player can access one if it buys a home, but you can imagine the rest being the same. So when you have to fill 1,000 planets and still want to let the player explore everything, the result is just emptiness and AI-generated nonsense. In Starfield, you are painfully aware of the limits of the simulations, and we're not talking about the NPCs that damage the immersion more than help.
I really wonder what actual meat tastes like. How do we know synthomeat is even remotely similar?
Yeah, you know how it goes.
How do we know synthomeat is even remotely similar?
Yeah, you know how it goes.
Might as well be cleaning bots. Or the enemy AI dumber than fish, at least those hide. And I bet no one thought about that gameplay-wise. But let's leave the fishing discussion for another time. I mean, the conscious design decisions. Why there is only room for 2 ships in Neon? And not too big at that? Can they fit these containers? Why there's only one bed on the frontier? Does Constellation have a thing for watching people sleep?
You are the soundest sleeper I've ever seen.
Not to mention Sidonia, where at best they need to take turns, especially the use in military. I understand the beds are boring, but where do they sleep? It's all because of this idea of not showing something that you cannot access. In the end, they had to give up in the UC capital, but still they didn't want to make a door saying inaccessible and just made a phantom building that doesn't have a door anywhere. So ruining the city planning is better than just telling the player, no, you can't go here. It's fair if you consider that a player can be a master hacker, then there's no door that can resist, but still. Well, this looks very silly. For example, in Neon there's one apartment, no mention of other floors, no corridor that leads to other units, just 3 or 5. That's it. If it's not useful for a mission, hide it. And this baby-proofing destroys any world building effort. Random generation doesn't help, but that's not my point. It's easy to say what are they doing here in a randomly generated location, but the supposedly handcrafted cities and outposts are those that made me think that the game was built by AI. For example, the city of Neon makes sense because it's a water planet that need to exploit a resource, the fish, chasm bass here. Incidentally, there are only 2 species of fish on the whole planet, but let's leave that aside. While you have plenty of spaceships around when you are traveling to the remote corners of the galaxy, Neon doesn't have any proper cargo activity, no space trackers in Starfield. For a city based around commerce and something that they cannot export because Aurora is illegal everywhere else, where are the fancy ships in the spaceport belonging to the affluent clients that are keeping the city alive, because the people in Ebsite can definitely not sustain the economy with all the shops around and one hotel that is not doing great? And while they added the sleep crates in Neon, they are nowhere near enough and definitely not for the rich tourists. Now I see why they have geodes, common geodes in their offices. These people are just playing pretend, the CEO. And of course the spaceport is way too small for all this tourism and trades, since Xenofresh Fishery is supposedly exporting food to the rest of the galaxy. While Chunks has the opposite problem. We don't know where it's made, but it's everywhere. So saying that they eat synthetic food is not really an answer to the old question of what do they eat. It just moves the post backwards. Now, where is everything produced? So instead of mining outposts everywhere, why there are not factories, Chunks factories? Processing horrible aliens or just the local plants, which would also explain why the plants and animals are so similar so far away in the galaxy, unless they have developed spaceships too. And yeah, there's no point in continuing in that direction, because when the choice of making randomly generated planets has been made, then this was the inevitable conclusion. Not much to discuss here, just a weird design decision, considering the exploration that's always at the center of Bethesda's game. So we can explore the whole universe, but we cannot see factory, warehouses, restaurants, apartments, schools, universities that are actually mentioned in the kids stuff trait, but we probably cannot visit, just like libraries. There are books scattered everywhere, but no mention of someone publishing them, but you can find the Pickwick Circle on the floor of a toilet where a psycho with an axe comes out to teach you the basics of combat in the tutorial. And I cannot help but wonder, was the pirate reading a 500-year-old book? Was he using for something else? Still paper, right? I would explain all the pages missing. Books did so much for the Elder Scrolls that I expected a lot of care and fill in the blanks. What happened, what people like in this time frame, but nothing of the sort. Just jokes. And the occasional religious text, even though it seems that no one cares. Why don't the random citizen come in every now and then? Even the precious skill books that in Morrowind were telling a story of an important person that you might be able to meet in the world, and that NPC would teach you the skill, now they're just sheets of paper with plus 5% written on it for whatever skill they improve. And even ignoring books, the way people speak doesn't make any sense.
I desire no company.
Of course,
leave.
On a fantasy game, you hear English.
Yes, Outlander, what do you want?
And you assume it's automatically translated to your own language. And in Morrowind you can assume that the main language is connected to Latin in some way. Makes sense, the language of the Empire, but it's full of native names, Dunmeri, and even more ancient languages that no one speaks anymore. Just having your local dark elf insulting you across the street did a lot to make the world feel believable. While now we have everyone speaking English,
Nice to meet you, Riley.
but also someone has weird accent when it's convenient.
Specifically the region known as France. A long and proud history.
But let's assume that at some point they decided all to speak English, and this is the new English.
Quite enough. Hi.
Slightly modified and translated by the video game to us. Then have they all forgotten about their language, about their traditions? Speaking an old Earth language might have been forbidden, with police arresting everyone that's not speaking the conventional language. So there might be a faction that refuses to comply and have a number of interesting missions around that, but if there are, I haven't found them. At the same time, some people would have picked up a new way of speaking, maybe through ads, inserting chunks in every phrase, or just referring to a new pastime, a new thing that we have no idea what it is, but you hear them saying that over and over again until you find maybe a new device or a new place that replaced a bar or an arcade. The possibilities are endless. Instead, they went with 3 different drinks in neon, for example. And Starfield is so bare bone that it seems to me that the actual game is not out yet. This is the early access version that they will complete slowly across many years. Unfortunately, the dialogue is already done, and I don't think they're going to change that. Though I wish they did, because the dialogue is high school level in the sense how a high schooler would write a play, and too often I got the impression of being in a school play instead of in space.
Sorry, that's not on the menu.
Now, Morrowind dialogue wasn't that great, but it was logic first. Get to the point, and then if you want, get more information, though copy and pasted, of course. But they knew their limitations and didn't expect the dialogue to carry the story. Instead, Starfield seems to do just that. Long expositions of nothing, said poorly, with a few choices that don't matter most of the time.
Wrong answer.
Even repetitions between different dialogue branches, because basically the first 2 or 3 options move on the dialogue. The ones below instead are just clarification that, again, can repeat what's already said in the other parts. And the difference between first and second is okay and cringe or edgy teenager or even someone younger than that. And that's clear from the very beginning. You have the option of saying I'm not interested in Constellation, and you get to join anyway, of course.
Don't you get it?
So you can either be a good boy and follow the leash, or throw a temper tantrum and follow the questline anyway. The very obvious attempts at variety are have a multiple choice question, and then an NPC will tell you, oh, you picked that one.
Of course. Especially considering this criminal record of yours.
And that's it. AI-generated dialogue. Also, I don't have anything against the B-movie storytelling that's prevalent in video games. My favorite game is XCOM 2, which is basically a B-movie, but you don't play XCOM for the story. The dialogue in Starfield makes me think of a B-movie director that wants to make a 9-hour epic with the script he has. And the only way they could do that was by diluting the world, so the dialogue has plenty of unnecessary words, the world has plenty of unnecessary space. They built the molds for enough Lego bricks to build a normal game, but they had to fill the whole universe with it. So no wonder it feels same and repetitive. No amount of weapon rarity will change that for me. And it doesn't help that the pace is glacial, between transitions, loading, walking. The good missions are buried under hours of fetch quests, and you still need to go through the horribly slow menu whatever thing you're doing, because you cannot just walk or travel to that place on your own. The universe is disconnected into many chunks, but while the interiors you can reach by getting to the nearest door or elevator, In space, your only option is to fast travel to the planet, which ruins the whole point of a Bethesda game. Yes, it's true that you see a planet in the distance, you can go there, but if you need to click on a menu and the only thing you will find are randomly generated content, where is the motivation to go there? Aside from the empty gameplay loop of killing enemies, improving your equipment, and getting the level up that any game has. What made Bethesda's games so unique was the fact that there was much more compelling you to go forward. And if you like this Bethesda light, great! They won't have to switch priorities anytime soon. As for me, at least I realized why I'm interested in early 2000 games. Smaller groups, smaller budgets meant more freedom and motivation, that as creativity shines through, just like on YouTube if you know where to look. Size is the problem for both studio and game. The creativity is hidden below hundreds of AI-generated layers. Words and places don't have anything meaningful, but are expected from a big-budget game set in a big world. What I expected was hundreds of empty planets with one point of interest that made sense, while most people lived in inaccessible houses, a handful of planets with breathable air. Copy and paste models would have been easily explained from buildings to chunks, with some care in arranging them, while ruthless corporation would have justified the boring and samey lifestyle of most NPCs, and so on. Instead, the Starfield we got was the usual Bethesda theme park with a different color palette, smaller, faster rewards, disconnected from each other, fast food exploration. Just like Chunk's idea, most people, they just want to put something in front of their face. And that's when the concept of Starfield was born. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.